guys, welcome back to the channel, and excuse me, I've been enjoying Season 6 lately, so I thought, do you know what, I'm going to make the sword and board from Season 6 of the Master Chief Collection, and yeah, this is pretty much a video on how to make it. So yeah, sorry it took so long. This is such a detailed build, so excuse me if the video is a bit fast at times, there's a lot to unpack, but anyway, I really hope you enjoy the video to see how I made this.
First things first, we're going to get our template and then we're going to lay it onto a foam. The template is available via my website at twopennyprops.co.uk. So once you've got that all nice and cut out, we can start gluing the two halves together. So I'll put a split here, so when you join the shield back up, it give it like a natural compound curve. So just take your time on this one. You've got to push and pull it towards each other. On my template, I'll give you, there'll be some registration marks. So once that's done, we're going to do some slight shaping with the heat gun, and we're also going to trace a bigger shield underneath. So obviously just get like the biggest bit of foam and trace your shield over it just roughly. You need the rough shape because once it's glued together we'll be trimming it. So just get some nice bends there and just flatten it just a little bit, give a bit of curvature. Take your time as usual, as I always say that. And heat up the other side, what you're going to be gluing it on, and just give that a little bit of shape as well. Then we're going to spread glue on both sides. Be very generous with the glue. You want to get on every single bit of surface. You do not want to have any gaps, so just make sure you get the edges like completely covered. I'm using a piece of cardboard to help me spread the glue all over the surface. Now after about 5 minutes of waiting for the glue just to dry a little bit until it's tacky, we're just going to place it on there. And then we're just going to start on the edges and just work yourself around and just make sure you get the middle nice and like glued together. I'm just going to bend it and shape it into place, give it a whack. Just make sure we put a little weight on it, just make sure it's completely glued and stuck down. It's a nice subtle curve, that's the kind of curve you want to be looking for. And after you get that nice shape, just get your knife and just trim the edges. I use the sharpest knife I have because you need to have a nice clean edge. Like so. And once it's all cut out, you can start trimming the template down a little bit and start getting those pieces out to start gluing on there. So I'm tracing the outer trim of the shield, and I'm using some sewing pins just to hold down the template because it's like really thin and I don't want it to move around. Just like before, put a nice generous amount of contact cement on both sides of the pieces. It doesn't matter if it goes over because we'll be painting the shield. And just take your time. I've added an extra inch on the trim of the template to give it a bit of room just in case it just goes over. So you can see there's a little bit extra popping out, but we'll trim it down to size when needed. Now go trim the access off so we can put the other side down so it doesn't bump or get in the way. Then we're going to use some sanding paper, 120 grit, and we're going to go around the whole entire edge just so it's nice and smooth and flat. And it makes it a little bit easier when we glue the thin piece of foam to go around the trim. So we're now moving on to electronics. I like to get the electronics done as soon as possible in the build. So we're just going to cut out the lights. We've got to cut through about 2 layers of foam, so just use something really nice and sharp. I'm using some acrylic, and I'm just going to cut it out with my scroll saw. And these will act as the emitters. I'm using a bit of packaging foam to diffuse the LEDs, so I'm cutting a little hole there, and that's where the LED is going to go, and I'm going to stack it like this. So you've got a nice layer of foam to disperse it, then you've got this opaque layer, and then you've got this blue layer. Then just pop them in the holes, and we are going to make a trench. So trench is going to be where the wires are going to be hidden into. So just doing a V-valley. So just kind of cut a line in the middle and then cut 2 diagonal lines in the center core, and then just kind of peel it out. It doesn't have to be neat because we're just going to be covering this with foam once the electronics are in. We're also going to do a nice neater version on the front of the shield. Now we're going to test the LEDs and insert them into the shield. I'm not going to show you how I wired them or how to solder, but I will show you the basic diagram of LEDs. It's exactly the same as this, just a little bit longer. You've got a battery, you've got your LEDs and a switch. You can buy battery packs with switches built in to make your life a little bit easier, but I'm just using what I got. I then use a triangle chunk and I just glued over the diffusion so it doesn't leak out from the back. Then trim down a strip of foam just to stick on the channel here so it covers the electronics and keeps them nice and safe. So I am making the handle, so I stacked 2 pieces of foam together and glue them and then cut out the template over it. If you want, you can put it onto 2 pieces of foam, cut it out and then glue it together. It's up to you. So the handle is not actually in the game, I'm just adding it because I want to be able to hold it in cosplay. And if you just want this to be a wall piece, you don't really need to make the handle, but it's there. So I'm going to carefully cut it away, and as you can see I stacked them both together so it's a bit more uniform. So copy the lines and you want to do another fally cut up to the length of the first layer of foam. So just do that on both sides. Make sure your blade is nice and sharp, like so, and then you're going to do the fally cut on the opposite side with about approximately the same amount of distance. Going to add glue into the fally cuts and just simply glue them together like so, and there we go. So I'm using my wood burner / soldering iron without the tip, and I'm just making these little rivet holes. You can also do this with a Dremel, what's probably a little bit more safer. Just make sure you've got well ventilated area and you're wearing a respirator. I then added these little squares on the bottom just to give my hand some distance between the shield, like so. Then just plop some glue on and just glued it on, and put another little rivet here and there. Then put on my Spartan forearm just so I can get a good distance between the strap for the arm, because if I make it too small my Spartan arm is not going to fit through. So I cut a strap to the appropriate size and made it look like leather. Then used one of my resin badges to make like a foam kind of heat stamp, and it worked really well. I do sell these pins as complete sets, but I also sell these raw castings for DIY projects, so feel free to purchase one to help support the channel. I then simply just glued it onto the back of the shield. It looks a little bit big, but it fits my Spartan arm, that's what I needed to do. I then used my favourite technique in this video and made some more screw holes. So I wasn't happy with the finish of the side of the shield, so I used a strip of foam and I just glued it to the outer edge. So moving swiftly on, we're going to start to finish the shield. So I'm just using my Sharpie and I'm drawing out all the paint marks, and then we're going to draw out all the scratches onto the foam. So we're going to use a Dremel to get the scratches. I'm using a sanding disc on this, and we're just going to take our time and go around the whole entire shield and add all the scratches. Some of these scratches are very deep, some of them are very light, so just check the picture. I forgot to add the triangle to the side of the shield, so I just quickly cut some triangles out. So what I did is stack 2 pieces of foam together and cut them out with my really sharp blade. I then simply just super glued them to the edge. Now you want to go over your whole entire prop with the hot air gun just to seal in all the detail for when we add paint. So I'll explain the masking a little bit later, but for now we can put the shield to the side and start on the skull. So for skull I'm using 5mm EVA foam, and I also made a Peril template or armorsmith file for the skull itself. I'll leave a link to the file of the Peril, but I also just have a printed version where you can just print on the computer. You don't need to download any software. It's got all the templates, it's got all the registration marks, all the angles, and everything's numbered. So you don't really need me to show you on video, but I've got a little bit of footage of me making a skull because I want to focus more on the sculpting part of it. But as you can see, I've done it really messy because I'm going to be covering all this with foam clay, so I don't really need it to be neat. So there's quite a few angle pieces, and there's some tricky parts of this. So I'm just showing you all the tricky bits for you. So once we've done that, we're going to use our Dremel just to smooth it out a little bit, just so the sculpt is a bit more organic. And like I said before, we are sculpting foam clay over the whole entire skull, so it doesn't have to be too neat. Just going to put the skull to the side for now, and we're going to use the main template and roughly cut out a shape. This shape will be used just to kind of hold the skull together and just flatten the bottom out, what's easier for gluing later. So we're going to do like a 45-degree angle cut in the perimeter of the foam piece. And we're just going to pop it out, put some glue on it and stick it in the skull. Satisfied with the base of the skull, we are going to start giving it a bit of structure and support by adding some scrap foam. So out of scrap foam I've cut these strips. I'm just kind of eyeballing at the moment and just super gluing it onto the skull. So I'll be chopping little bits off and sizing up. It doesn't matter because you won't be able to see this once we are done. Some bits on the side and give it like a cross shape. Keep everything, you know, in line and not moving around. And also help to hold onto while we're doing a bit of sculpting. And while the glue dries, we can start on the jaw pieces. So we've got 4 of these. They're both the same and then they're mirrored. We're going to put a nice bit of glue on them, and then we're going to join them together by the point. So take your time with this and don't completely glue it down. Notice the bottom hole, it's where the big tooth is going to go. So all the construction is done. We've built the skull, we've built the jaw, and now we're going to go on to sculpting it with our foam clay. Make sure the skull is wet so the foam clay will stick onto it. So we're going to build up the brow from the top of the head, and we're going to make little pancakes and little sausages just to sculpt this. We're just using nothing but water and our hands for this, and it's going to take quite a while, and it's going to take quite a few layers. So I did about 3 layers of this foam over the course of several days. The foam takes 24 hours to dry, so it gives you a nice amount of time to work with. This also means if you make a mistake, you can easily correct it. So what I'm doing here is just building layers and layers and layers, and using water just to smooth it out. There's not much else I can tell you apart from you just gotta, you know, look at the image, look what you're doing, and just, you know, just have fun. Just go freehand and just sculpt to your heart's content and sculpt it to the best of your ability. And once you feel that you're satisfied with what you've made, you can stop and leave it to dry. As we sculpt the skull, I'd like to thank this month's patrons for all your continued support. I always appreciate it so much. And if you want to help the channel, link in the description to my Patreon page. Patreon helps me be able to keep the channel going by helping me make bigger and better projects. I make no money out doing these YouTube videos, so it would mean a lot if you could support me. And if you don't fancy doing that, that's totally fine. Subscribing is free and can help just as much. We're on the way to 1,000 subscribers, so smash that subscribe button, give me a like, ring the notification bell and all that jazz. So thank you very much. So eventually we are slowly smoothing out the skull. So all the hard edges are starting to disappear and you can't see what's underneath. At this stage I like to use the dry foam clay just so I can actually get a bit of sculpting. I'm kind of doing like a nose at the moment, and I'm kind of bringing out the brows, as you can see. You can also use bigger scraps of foam to fill out the jaw. So as you can see there, I've got a bit of foam and I'm sculpting on top of it. So I need the bottom of the jaw will be visible, just slightly. And I kind of want to build up the jaw a little bit and have somewhere where the jaws actually glue into. So I'm not doing too much sculpting here, I'll just cut a shape out and I'll just sculpt it on top. Using my paintbrush just to smooth it out a little bit. Sculpting the jaw, we just used our foam clay and wrapped it all around the jaws. And we used scissors and knives and just kind of sculpted it, and I used our Dremel to get the shape. I then rolled up these bits of foam clay, waited for them to dry, and then glued them onto the jaw. And then once you're satisfied, we can move on to actually painting the prop. We're going to make sure that the green masking tape is on the paint chips and on the LEDs. We're going to use our trusty Flexi Paint Silver and do about 5 coats. We are also going to do about 5 coats on the skull. Make sure you cover top to bottom. I then added a darker shade of gunmetal in the centre of the shield, leaving the silver on the outer edge. So we're going to remove our green tape and make this awesome kind of paint chipped effect. Don't forget the LED lights as well, I almost forgot about them. So just peel it off and make sure you get all the tape off. Don't worry about it getting a little bit damaged on the edge. We're going to use a hot air gun just to shrink the edge down, and afterwards use a few coats of Flexi paint under the peeled up bits just to stick it back down again. And after that you get this awesome looking like paint chipped effect. So do that to all the paint chips and then remove the tape from the LEDs before you forget. So my one, I decided to paint it blue. You can paint it any other colour, you can use whatever multiplayer Spartan your colour is to paint it. So I'm just going to start from the centre and kind of just dab the paintbrush around. I'm not going to do it on the edges, because on the edges I'm going to add this like dirty black. And we're just going to smudge it around the edges and just use our tissue to get it off. So I kind of sponge it in and make like a gradient effect. So once you sponge around the edges completely nice and dark, we're going to do it to the centre, because this is where the skull will sit, and it's got like a bit of a shadow and grime build up underneath the skull. So I'm using references from the video game and pictures I printed off. And as that is drying, we're going to put it to the side and work on the skull. So we're going to draw the cuts onto the skull and use our Dremel to cut it out. Like the shield, we are using a disc bit on our Dremel. You're probably wondering why we're doing this now rather than at the beginning. It's because I didn't want to have too many layers of Flexi paint filling the cracks. So we're only going to do it about halfway, and then we're going to do the final paint job on top. And then trim the jaws down to fit onto the skull and glue them to the back. Afterwards we did a quick couple of white coats, and then we're going to go over with a brown watery paint. And we're going to go back and forth using blacks, browns and even silvers. And we're just going to put it all over the skull and just wipe it off. And kind of just keep repeating the process. So I'm going to use quite a lot of blacks and make sure it gets into all the cuts. Switching back and forth between browns and blacks, so we're just going to get this really thick like watery coat on top, because when we wipe this away it's going to look really good and it's going to bring it to life. So now we can use a tissue to take it off. Notice I'm only doing it lightly. I want to keep quite a lot of the black to give that grimy like skull effect. This is a really old skull and it's been in loads and loads of battles. So I'm being very selective of what I'm taking off. So I'm making sure the build up stays in all the creases and like the cheekbones, and make sure all the black stays within the scratches. I'm using the tissue in many ways. I'm wiping it off, I'm dabbing it and just gently pressing it. After we are satisfied with our brown washes and our black washes, we are going to move on to just highlighting the scratches a little bit, just to bring them out a little bit. So I'm being very selective here on what cuts I want to bring out. So I'm using like silvers and browns, because you know it's an alien skull, we want to give a bit more character. I'm going to use some blacks just to put under the eyes, give a bit more depth. And then I'm going to use my rag or my tissue just to take a little bit away. Once we've done that, we'll have a really nice detailed skull, and I think it'll look really awesome. Once you're satisfied with the skull, we're going to simply just glue it to the shield. And our shield should be done, and it looks wonderful. I'm going to take some shots outside and some photos. You may have noticed I've done some slight changes to my one. It's just adding extra strap and just putting a PVC pipe in the handle just to get a little bit more strength. I also kept the bird. But anyway, let's roll some footage of the completed prop.
Yeah, so hopefully that wasn't too hard to follow along. You should have a nice sword and board now, without the sword. I have a 3D printed one I made quite a few years ago. But if you want me to make a foam machete so you can use it with this, just let me know and I'll make a new video for it. Don't worry about it, I'll make it. But anyway, so we're getting a really nice collection of Halo props for Season 6 of Master Chief Collection. We have the axe, what we made last time. So if you want to see how this one was done, watch in the end card and I'll link this video. But yeah, what do you want me to make next? We have the sword and board with the Season 6 axe. So yeah, what else can I make from, well, hopefully a new season will come out soon so I can make something new. If all goes well, hopefully we'll be making the rocket launcher with the Hazard's Pay skin on it. So yeah, stick around and make sure you subscribe, like and comment, and I'll see you soon. 2 penny props out.